Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to have you here with us in London. Thanks a lot for taking the time.
Thank you.
Not an easy one to describe this film, or at least to categorise. Genre bending, mind bending, kind of psychological thriller, dark comedy, perhaps a satire. How do you go about describing it to people?
I think you did a good job. Yeah, I try to avoid describing it if I possibly can. Let other people do it for me. So you've done a great job. Thank you.
And of course, not your first time working with Adam Pearson after Chained for Life. And I understand you had him in mind, when you were crafting the role. So maybe you can tell us a bit about where you first got the idea for the film, how your own personal experiences might have informed it, but particularly wanted to collaborate again with Adam.
Yeah, I loved working with Adam on my previous film, but I felt his performance may have been underrated because he played the shy character, and people sort of assumed that he's a shy person, especially he had played a shy character in Under the Skin as well. So, but the fact is, Adam is quite gregarious and outgoing, so I wanted to write a role that would show off his range, and there was also sort of a tribute to him. And also, I had, some people said that just using him in a film was exploitative, and this sort of, I was sort of taken aback by this because it had always been my intention, I have a cleft palate, it had always been my intention to cast people with disabilities and disfigurements, and if I can't do that, the only thing to do is to cast, able-bodied actors in prosthetics, for instance. So I felt like both of these have pitfalls, which means there's really no way to portray this, which means no representation of this subject. And so I thought, I'm going to do both in this film. So I have Sebastian Stan in prosthetics and Adam Pearson, and I let them sort of battle it out.
And yeah, maybe you could say a bit more about casting these other two, Sebastian Stan. I mean, he just seems to have come in and been so committed to the role and, everything that you can take away from the film. And then with Renata, of course, her first English language film.
Yeah.
So really interesting casting there. How did you land on those two?
Sebastian came to us. I didn't, the script was sort of floating out there the way these things do. And Sebastian, I heard he was interested. I didn't really take it seriously because people get interested and they walk away. But when I spoke to him, I saw that he understood the script, that he was really wanting to do it. I thought he would be perfect, and I felt that there was something he felt he could portray some tortured part of himself with this role that he wasn't getting to do in other roles. So I felt that there was something personal in it for him, which intrigued me. And as soon as he came aboard, the film really came together. I really have to hand it to him. He did a lot in terms of rallying the forces and getting A24 behind us. And he also was responsible for the prosthetics. He found Mike Marino, who did the prosthetics, and he sort of convinced him to work for, well below his usual pay rate. So, I really credit a lot of this film happening to Sebastian. And Renata was an idea both Sebastian and I had. I had this idea because I was not sure it was a great role, actually, because I couldn't think of who could play it. No matter who I thought of, it just didn't seem to work. And then when I saw Renata in Worst Person in the World, I thought she could work, but I would never have said that aloud because it is her first English language film. She was blowing up at the time, and I didn't think this was a fairly low budget film. I didn't think she would be interested in something like this, so I just didn't even say it. And then Sebastian said it. He said, "Did you see Worst Person in the World?" I was thinking the same thing, but could we get her? And he said, it's worth asking if that's what you want. So we asked, and literally 2 days later, she was, I was talking with her, and she said, "Yeah, I want to do this."
And one of the things I think is so striking about the film, sort of sets it apart from anything else that's out there, is it's constantly defying audience expectation. You think you're in one genre, and then there's a twist and there's a turn, and then you're suddenly somewhere else. And the fact that it's sort of really leans into the dark comedy, it leans into this idea of discomfort. So how important was that to your storytelling, and what did you want to achieve with that tone?
Well, I think one problem with films about, with portraying disfigurement, for instance, is that you also have to get through prejudices about films about the subject, because films about the subject tend to fall into a certain kind of category, and people know what to expect. And so I almost have to face that head on within the film in order to go beyond it. So I'm sort of aware of what people are thinking. I think even with my previous film, Chained for Life, which was also about the subject, I felt like if I saw the trailer for this movie, I wouldn't want to even see it, because I would assume that I knew what it was, and it wasn't that. And I think people who saw it were surprised by what it was and what it wasn't. And so I have to sort of keep working through those layers of perceived ideas about these kinds of films. And so the film is constantly engaging in that. And sort of, I almost have to stay one step ahead of the audience just to deal with the subject sensibly, the way that you would deal with any other subject.
And there's a key part of the film, they're talking about writing the character for the stage, about this idea, it's a villain, a hero, an outcast. How much is the film itself, in this sort of nuanced way it's dealing with the subject, sort of wanting to resist that? If you're going to have, non-disabled actors play people with disabilities, or if you're having someone with a disability in a film, avoiding having those sort of archetypes or stereotypes. And, how did you want to engage people in that debate?
I really didn't think about it in one sense, because, this is a personal subject for me. So I don't have Adam's disfigurement, but I have my own, and I'm just writing about that. And I'm just sort of writing about my own experiences and my own feelings about myself, which are, and the way that I feel that I'm perceived. And I don't have any fixed ideas about this. Sometimes I'm ashamed of the way I look. Other times, I'm okay with it. And sometimes I feel, judged. And other times I feel judged positively, almost. Like I have all these mixed emotions about it. So I'm just throwing all my feelings about living with some kind of disfigurement into a film. And the problem with disability and disfigurement representation in general is that no two disabilities or disfigurements are alike. And so it's really hard to say, one experience is not a shared experience, really. So, Adam is bringing his experience to this film. I'm bringing my experience to this film. We have very different lives, but we have some measure of shared experience, and we're both bringing that to the film, and so that it becomes something more than just my experience. And that's really just how I think about it. To me, it's a personal film, and then all these other people bring something of themselves to it.
And I think what's really smart about it is it can work on so many different levels, whether you're talking about representation for people with disabilities, but then there's almost a lot of universal themes in there as well, about this sort of confrontation that Edward has with his own ego, and how we sort of put our own perception of our identities in the hands of others, particularly when it's negative perception. So for a contemporary audience that does seem very image obsessed, there's probably a lot that people can take from it, do you think?
Yeah, I've been really surprised to some extent, but also very happy with the sense that, with the feeling that it's universal, that people have taken something from it, that it seems to be speaking on a more universal level. I've always been somewhat ashamed of the way I look, and then I meet someone like Adam who takes control of the way he wants to be perceived, and I was inspired by that. And it never even would have occurred to me to create a character like his character Oswald until I met him. And so in some ways, it's just me dealing with a sort of identity crisis. Like, could I have lived my life differently? What is it not the way I look that's been holding me back in life? And so these questions do become universal. It was just sort of my own feelings about this, and then, so I'm glad that it can resonate on these other levels.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the film.
Thank you very much.
Presenting here in London. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.